All right. So let's see. Let's go into our art spotlight. One of the most prolific artists. Everyone has. It's a household. He's a household name. He is Pablo Picasso, and lived to, I think, like 90 or 91. Sarah will give us some details. I think he's produced over 50,000 pieces of art, people say. Uh, some folks have summed his life up as essentially love, fame, and tragedy. There's a current art show that's actually named as that at the Tate. I don't know if you can see it virtually, but we should actually try to see if we could figure that out. A lot of his art was actually during what we had described last week as during the expressionistic period. His art actually spans a number of different genres, kind of going into the abstract. But a lot of his art is kind of like deconstruction of what we consider to be kind of typical realistic images and kind of almost cubist forms or other forms. And so let me hand it over to Sarah to tell us more about Pablo Picasso.
Hi, everyone. Yes, we're going to cover a lot of different styles today. As AJ mentioned, Picasso is arguably one of the most well-known artists and has such an extensive body of work. So I will do my best to cover the main periods of painting throughout his life, but there are a lot. So Pablo Ruiz Picasso was born in Malaga, Spain, to a middle-class family. His ancestors were minor aristocrats, and his father was a painter who specialized in painting birds and other game. Pablo showed an interest in drawing and painting at an early age. It's said that his first words were pis pis, which is short for lápiz, which is the Spanish word for pencil. So his father started giving him formal art training starting around the age of 7. And he ended up, Picasso struggled in school because of his obsession with art. After his sister died of diphtheria, the family moved to Barcelona, and Picasso was enamored with the city and later referred to it as his actual true home. He was sent by his father and uncle to the most prestigious art school in Madrid, but he hated the formal instruction and left shortly after. He traveled to Paris in 1900 and shared a small room with his friend, writer and poet Max Jacob. And they lived in severe poverty, and it's said that they even burned some of his art to keep their apartment warm. And the blue period is what this part of Picasso's life resulted in. So let's take a look at one of his blue period pieces. So this might look familiar to some of you. This is The Old Guitarist, and it's arguably Picasso's most notable piece from the blue period. It was done in 1903. And as I mentioned, Picasso was living in severe poverty at this time, but something else that really affected this period in his life was the suicide of his good friend, Casagemas, who was a fellow painter as well. And Picasso was penniless and was just surrounded and immersed in suffering. And so many of Picasso's blue period paintings depicted the lives of the ill, the poor, and the struggling, as we can see with this particular painting. This somber guitarist is emaciated and blind as he cradles his instrument. But in a way, it also seems that he's oblivious to his poverty and his lack of sight. In symbolist writings at the time, excuse me, many writers depicted blind people as having these special powers of inner vision. And you can also note that the distorted way the body was painted was actually inspired by El Greco, the Spanish painter from the 16th century, who was a large influence on Picasso throughout his entire career. Something fascinating about this painting that I actually didn't know until recently was that there is a hidden image behind the guitarist. So let me show you. This is an X-ray of the Old Guitarist painting, and you can see kind of a ghostly figure behind him. And while I would have loved for this to be some sort of hidden message by Picasso, art historians and art technicians actually believe that it's just a previous sketch of this painting. But it ended up leading to a much better understanding of how Picasso creates his pieces and his artistic process in general. So at first glance, when I look at this, I wouldn't necessarily think this is a Picasso. Following World War I, Picasso made his first trip to Italy. And there was what is referred to as a, quote, return to order by many painters at the time, who returned to kind of a neoclassical style of painting, including Picasso. As well, during this time, he was influenced by his friend Paul Cézanne and his post-impressionist style of painting. So this piece is called Woman Seated in an Armchair, and it is one of his lesser known paintings. You can see Picasso uses looser brush strokes and plays with shading in a portrait that kind of contradicts many of his earlier works, especially his more cubism pieces. So this will also probably be familiar to some of you. I see that it's some of your backgrounds. This is Guernica, and we're doing a bit of a 180 from the previous painting and focusing on this painting, which is one of his famous masterpieces that was done in 1937. So this painting depicts the town of Guernica in the Basque region of Spain. And during the Spanish Civil War, it was seen as an epicenter of the resistance and was targeted by Spanish nationalists. And the Nazis actually helped the nationalists and bombed Guernica extensively on April 26, 1937. So this painting highlights the tragedies and suffering of individuals, especially, you know, Picasso wanted to point out that it was a lot of innocent civilians that ended up having to deal with the aftermath of this tragedy. Its harsh lines and bleak palette accentuate the tragedies of war. And art historians differ greatly in their analysis of this piece, but Picasso himself said that the bull is supposed to represent the onslaught of fascism and that the horse represents the people of Guernica. And I know that the bull and the horse were two important symbols in Spanish culture. There is definitely kind of a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of, you know, harsh lines. It's very abstract, and so there's a lot of differing opinions on what exactly everything means. And finally, I saw this was, I saw at least one person's background was this. This is the Dove of Peace. So Guernica is still hailed as one of the world's most important anti-war paintings, and Picasso went on to create other pieces that represent peace as well. So the Dove of Peace was chosen to be the emblem of the first International Peace Conference in Paris in 1949. And Picasso was inspired by a more realistic picture of a pigeon given to him by a friend of his, Henri Matisse. And Picasso went on to create a simple graphic line drawing that became one of the most recognizable symbols for peace. He even went on to name his daughter Paloma, which means dove in Spanish. So it would be impossible to categorize Picasso into one movement or style. As we can see, he had so many different periods throughout his long career, but I hope today was a small introduction to some of his more well-known pieces and some of his lesser-known pieces. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. That was fascinating. I think Guernica is at the United Nations. Is that right?
It says it's housed at the Museo Nacional Centro de Arte Reina Sofia. Sorry if I...
Oh, no, then. Okay, I thought it was at the United Nations. Okay, wow. Well, do we have any questions or comments?
AJ, Melissa here. There's a question in the chat from Kevin Fields, and he wants to know if anyone knows how well these paintings would actually burn. Seems that the oils would outgas a lot of the fumes just to heat the house.
That's very true. I wonder if it was maybe sketches of his, who knows?
Or just the frames.
I have a question. In the painting behind you, in the dove, are those stars or some sort of symbols? Or just his signature?
You mean the yellow and red?
Yep, the color.
I want to say they're flowers. I can look into that. I feel like they're flowers, and then you can see kind of the green stems to the flowers. Kind of an abstract, interpretation of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Also, we have a comment in the chat room that that someone likes his daughter's perfume. So I guess his family really kind of also expanded in many, many media, right? Not just ceramics and different forms of art, but also jewelry and perfume and other ways to express their artistic talents.
Mhm.